Hello everyone, my name is Natasha Balfour and this is Becoming Her Anyways. Today I want to talk about kind of like a niche topic, and honestly it's kind of the reason why I started this podcast, because as you know this is called Becoming Her Anyways. Anyways being, despite all of the other things that could have led to you, spiraling or having a more difficult life. Essentially today I'm going to talk about what it's like when you don't have the family that you feel like you deserve. And not only, what it's like from someone who has experienced this, but also how to deal with it. Because I do feel like this is something that people don't really like to talk about. Because obviously no one likes to open up about their family dynamics. A lot of the time, people don't really like to talk about the difficult dynamics they faced at home. And I just hope that people who are in this situation can listen to this, because the reason I started this podcast is because I want you guys to have great lives and know that it doesn't matter your environment as long as you yourself have inner peace and you're working towards having a great life. Because at the end of the day, guys, it's our responsibility to make sure that we have a good life despite where we come from. So today I'm really just going to focus on the difficulties of not having the background that you wished you had. So when I was growing up, all I ever wanted was a nuclear family. I just wanted a big house. I didn't grow up in a big house. I wanted siblings as well. I was an only child. I basically had quite a difficult upbringing because I had two parents that were quite emotionally immature in their own ways. And I really struggled with this because I was going to other people's houses and their parents were lovely. And I know that obviously people perform in front of people they don't know, and that's fine. But I had a family that was difficult, honestly, behind closed doors and also in public. It was hard for me growing up because also I was kind of told, because I come from a broken family, I wasn't really going to achieve anything. I was told this a lot when I was growing up. And I definitely do think that it kind of diminished my confidence. I believe that, I wouldn't have what everyone else had because I wasn't from this kind of family. And a lot of the time I felt really alone, but also I just felt like I was missing something. And honestly, guys, at the end of the day, you have to accept it. Your family is not the family that you want. And that is the truth. And obviously, we can all go, oh, I'm such a victim, why did God do this to me? Why did the universe do this to me? I'll never achieve anything because I didn't come from a wealthy family. I didn't come from a family where, our emotions were talked about. So I have to become a terrible person. Guys, we are not about that life. Okay, the whole point of this podcast is to completely erase all of that. Listen, guys, we cannot have a victim mindset, okay? We cannot live like this. It is fine to acknowledge it. It's fine to go, I didn't come from a family that I wanted. And that's okay, because that's not your fault, guys. We entered the lottery, okay, when we were born. We didn't choose our family. We didn't have that, privilege. No one has that privilege. And honestly, guys, I know what it feels like. It feels awful. It feels like, you didn't get something that you deserved. You missed out. And I definitely do believe that I deserve better. But does that mean I'm going to go and be like, oh, my life is so bad? No, obviously not. I'm not going to do that because that's not true. Just because I didn't have the best upbringing doesn't mean my life was bad. It doesn't mean that my childhood was the worst. Obviously I did have somewhat of a nice childhood. Obviously there are people who experience worse things than me, but there's people who experience better. But that's not really the point. The point that I'm trying to say is that just because you came from a family that you just feel like didn't really appreciate you and abused you maybe physically or emotionally, it does not mean that you can't heal and move on and have good relationships. I just want you to know that anyone who is experiencing this or has experienced this, I understand you and I know how awful it is. But we cannot allow that to make us cold-hearted, horrible people, like a lot of people have done. We can't allow this. So what are we going to do instead? Okay, guys, here's a guide on how to survive this. So first of all, have a family outside of your house. Find friends that didn't go through childhood trauma. I've said this before. Find sane friends who don't understand what it's like. And I know that you're not going to be able to relate to them and you're not really going to be able to tell them about your trauma, and that's fine. Okay? Because there are other ways of expressing that trauma. Listen, guys, you do need to get it out. You do need to talk about it, but don't talk about it to people who haven't experienced it. Also, to be honest, I don't know if you should really talk about it with people who experience it either. Talk to someone who's trained to help you. Or I suppose when you're really close to someone, then you can open up to them. Or go to a therapist. Or, sorry, when I say therapist, I actually meant ChatGPT. Now, I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding that, but honestly, for me, if you use it responsibly and you use it as an outlet for your emotions, I think it's amazing. But basically, guys, listen, find a family outside your home, okay? I'm being so serious. Find people in school or wherever that you can trust and make that your family. Do you know what I mean? Make sure that these people are people that can help you develop, because at the end of the day, we are who we hang out with. And if you come from a difficult home, but you're in a friend group with people who didn't, and they're all, focused on their education, they all have nice families. Yes, obviously, sometimes it's not nice by comparison, but the point is not to compare. The point is to mimic them and to look at them and say, okay, how can I behave like someone who had the family they deserved. Because guys, you're going to pick up a lot of toxic traits from your parents. Okay, if your parents are constantly screaming and shouting and can't express their emotions, you're probably going to pick that up. So you need to find people who know how to express their emotions. I feel like for me, the one thing I really learned is not to react emotionally in the situation, like deal with my emotions later. I feel like also understanding like when you're in a bad mood, or like understanding when someone's actually done something to you. I feel like literally understanding yourself, like studying yourself. No one can even tell me anything about myself anymore. I don't want anyone's honest opinion on me, because honestly, guys, like I know myself. I know my toxic traits. I know what I need to improve. I know what is wrong with me if there's anything wrong. I don't need someone else's opinion. And I understand, obviously, your friends can give constructive criticism, and that's great. That's wonderful. But honestly, guys, like no one knows you more than you. Okay, that's why we've got to be conscious of our behavior. We can't be delusional about who we are. We have to be like, okay, what are the toxic traits that I do that I picked up from my family? Guys, listen, the explanation of your family trauma can only go so far, but you cannot blame them for your behavior. If you came from a difficult family where, you were physically abused or emotionally abused, yes, that's very sad. And yes, you need to deal with that. And yes, obviously, you might have had like an avoidant attachment or an anxious attachment. And yes, you might have anxiety, and that's fine. Those things are fine, because those things you can accept and you can work with. I feel like a big part of coming from a difficult family is accepting what you can't change about yourself. So for example, I can't change the fact that I have an anxious attachment. I can't. But because of that, I've adapted, right? I have adapted. I have said, okay, I'm going to have a secure boyfriend who's going to be able to comfort me. He's going to be able to reassure me. And if I can't have that, I'd rather be alone. That's how I've dealt with that. Okay. I'm not going to let the fact that my parents were a little bit emotionally, mentally ill stop me from having good relationships. In fact, it's actually motivating me to be so picky when it comes to relationships. I am turned off very quickly by men. And I know that this is like such a funny thing to say, but in a sense of like, there are very specific things that I look out for that I feel like a lot of people wouldn't if they didn't have that experience. By the way, guys, if you went through a traumatic childhood experience, chances are you might actually be more emotionally intelligent. You might be more empathetic, and you can use that to your advantage because you can find people who deserve to be understood by you and to be consoled by you. But guys, listen, like if you didn't come from the family that you want, the best thing to do, I say this in my other videos, get an education. Go and study. Find a cafe outside of your house where you can go and habitually study. Okay, because that's your one-way ticket out of that situation. If you have education, you are powerful. Okay, you can get a degree, you can get a job, and you can leave. Okay, now guys, listen, I know that some of you are a bit too young to move out, or it's not at the moment like possible for you, and that's fine. Guys, get a job or go outside. Listen, the best thing that I ever did was I would like leave my house at 7 o'clock in the morning and come back at 7:45 at night. And anything at home, missed out on. I did not care. Like it was not for me, and I barely argued with my parents because I was not here. So, how are you going to argue with me? But guys, listen, like also, I can't say this enough. Date someone with those parents. Date someone with the most amazing parents that you can find, okay? Because then you'll know what it feels like. Listen, I once dated someone who had the most wonderful parents I ever could have dreamed of having. Honestly, guys, like I was just so jealous. And when I was in this relationship, I got very close to this family. And although that relationship did not last, because obviously I had to move on and, it was just time to move on. I had that experience. I know what it's like to be in that family. Even though it was temporary, I've had that experience. I've been in a house where everyone communicates and everyone's calm and everyone loves each other and, there's little fighting. And I know this because I was in that house a lot. And I've experienced it, I know what it's like. Even though I didn't have that when I was growing up, I experienced this at young enough age to reprogram my brain. So now when I go out in the world, I look for that. If it wasn't for me, if I wasn't healed enough to have this relationship, if I had blamed everyone, if I had stayed with a toxic man who, had an avoidant attachment and I didn't learn from that, I never would have experienced this. If I didn't look inside myself and say, okay, how can I become a better person? I never would have attracted someone who was, had barely any trauma. I never would have done that. And obviously, I think the issue for me was that, like, yes, I got attached to that life, but also after I left that life, I still knew what it was like. And so when I go out into the world, I look for that. I look for this. I don't look for what I had when I was growing up, I suppose also your parents become kind of like templates for what you don't want. My biological father is a template for everything I do not want in a person or to be. And I just feel like it's so necessary to notice if you have any similarities with your parents, because obviously it's not your fault, right? If you were younger and you didn't know how to behave, because you weren't really socialized, you kind of grew up alone, like the people around you didn't show you how to be a human being, then don't blame yourself for when you were younger, okay? I'm talking maybe from like, when you were growing up all the way from maybe age, I don't know, for me, I would probably say maybe like 15, 14, around that area, you start kind of realizing, or maybe I suppose latest guys, 18, okay? If you're 18 years old and you're still behaving in a toxic way, then you really need to change because you're an adult now. Like, you cannot blame anyone anymore. I think it's okay if, like, when you're growing up, you didn't have the best behavior. Perhaps you were toxic, perhaps you were friends with people who do, let's say, I don't know, criminal activity, whatever. It doesn't matter, guys, okay? You can always get rid of that. As long as, I don't know, you don't have a prison record, right? As long as you didn't murder anyone, you can always move on. It doesn't matter. Listen, I didn't have the best behavior when I was growing up. I didn't know how to behave. No one really taught me. I didn't have good examples. So I had to, from trial and error, talking to people and, also through school, that's how I learned how to be. I think also school is such an important place to learn how to be because it's so difficult, I feel like, especially secondary school. Like, that's where you learn how to behave. And I think that, especially in secondary school, like, you're at school all the time. For majority of your life, you're at school. And so you're not really with your parents. Like, you don't really have to be around the toxic behavior. Yes, when you come home, you will be. But guys, like, you guys have that whole entire space to realize who you want to be and how to act and, like, how to choose better friends. And that's such an important thing. I feel like don't underestimate school. Because honestly, like, I miss school. I didn't think I would. I hated it when I was there. But honestly, like, I miss it because it was just kind of like a structure. And like I said, I would leave my house at 7 o'clock in the morning to go to school. I'd go to school. Then afterwards, I'd go to my revising cafe and revise. And then I'd be home. And there would be no time for arguments. I'd see my mom, be like, hey, mom, and she wouldn't be stressed out. So it'd be fine. Guys, honestly, like, it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter what you've experienced. It doesn't matter. You have to put it on yourself to be a good person. You need to put it on yourself. It's because it's your responsibility, no one else's, to change your behavior. If you had toxic behavior, controlling behavior, behavior that's hurt people, you need to take a step back. Okay? You need to look at what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, the only person that you are really disadvantaging is you. No one else is going to care. Okay? You're going to get into a relationship with someone. You're going to treat them bad because, oh, I had such a bad childhood. They're going to leave you. They're going to find someone else. Okay? And you're going to be left. Say, for example, if you have angry parents, right? You grew up in a house where it's kind of volatile and you kind of like always in eggshells. Those people have to live for themselves long after you're gone. They will be their angry selves. My biological father is sitting in wherever he lives by himself, knowing that 2 of his children are still alive. Because guess what? Both me and my half brother, we have both cut him off. Yes, guys, I did grow up without siblings. It's actually quite interesting. My half brother lives in Canada, so he grew up in Canada. So we have only met once, but we keep in contact, generally. Honestly, I keep more in contact with his wife because he barely answers me. But we were not raised together, right? Because my biological father, he is an abuser, right? And we both have cut him off since we were very young. We do not have any contact with him. We do not have anything to do with him. Now, he's a very angry man, okay? He has rage. He's manipulative. He's very controlling. But the good news is that he has no power. He doesn't have a job. He has nothing. So he doesn't have any control. He has to sit with himself. Now, guys, he had a bad childhood too, okay? His parents were divorced when he was quite young. His dad left him when he was 11, like his whole family, him and his 3 siblings. And his dad married someone else. And they had children together. So, my biological father barely had any contact with his dad. His mother was also, I think she was a narcissist. From what I've met with her, like, she's a narcissist, right? I don't think she's a great person. She even told me that she would vote for Trump when I was at her house. And by the way, she's not American. So there was really no excuse for that. But again, like, honestly, it's just crazy. He's just sitting there in his house because he blames his childhood. He says, oh, didn't have good parents. If I had good parents, maybe I'd be different. He's a victim, right? He always talks about how everyone else does things to him, but he never takes any accountability. When I was younger, I used to send him emails after I'd cut him off. I cut him off at the age of 12. I went to live with my mother. I never, ever saw him again. And he would constantly email me and say, oh, I'm so sorry. And like, you misunderstood. And oh, I raised my voice at you. And it's crazy because honestly, like, the emails that he writes me are crazy. Like, they'll say, I didn't mean to raise my voice at you. I was just stressed. Like, it's it's the lack of like self-awareness, because the reason I left him, like the reason I had to cut off one of my parents that I was in contact with since I was literally born, was not just simply because he raised his voice at me. Yes, obviously, like you shouldn't be raising your voice at children, but this man terrorized me. This man isolated me. This man held grudges against people in my life and also in his life, or used to be in his life. And he'd just constantly talk about these things. To this day, he still reminisces about things that happened in like 2016. It's crazy. Like this man is not sane, right? But he blames everyone else. He says, oh, it's this person's fault and this person's fault and this person aggravated me, but he never takes any accountability. And guys, he won't even change after he's lost 2 of his children who are still alive. Still here. I'm probably a car ride away, okay? Like, and my brother has been in England, like lots of times growing up, and he never ever got into contact with our father. And it's really crazy. I think, honestly, this just goes to show that some people just don't care. Like, they will have terrible behavior until the day they die because they refuse to take accountability. But we are not for that life, okay? Just because you had a bad childhood does not mean you have to go around ruining other people's lives. If anything, you should be motivating to help people because you know how it feels, okay? You know how it feels to be in a shitty position when the people who are supposed to love you and be there for you and care for you because they're biologically related to you, they can't do that. And that's fine. But you guys owe it to yourself to focus on your education, make good friends, find good partners, and just get on with life. There's no reason to blame anyone or anything. It's okay if parts, like some of these things are part of your personality, you know, like I said, anxious attachment, anxiety, you know, maybe you just know that like you need reassurance. Maybe you know you need a bit of independence, but at least realize it. But don't go around blaming people for your toxic behavior because that will not get you anywhere, okay? People are going to just leave you and people are just going to find someone else who doesn't blame all their issues on external sources. Take accountability, okay? If you didn't come from the family that you want, there's no point crying about it. There's no point saying, oh, why do bad things happen to me? Oh my God, because you guys don't understand that there are people who have had everything handed to them. Do you know, I know people who had wonderful families growing up, who are talented musically, who, you know, had siblings that were their age growing up that don't understand family trauma because their family was healed when they had decided to have a family, right? Their parents didn't have all these underlying traumas that they inflicted on their children. And these children still grow up to be miserable. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. You know, I would go to people's houses and be like, wow, like this is such a nice family house. And these people would start going on about how bad their life is because they had an argument with someone, or I don't even know that I have met some of those toxic people who have come from the nicest backgrounds. Like people who had supportive and loving, emotionally and physically present families have grown up to terrorize other people. Now, I don't understand that. Honestly, I don't get that. Like I have met some of the most terrible people who I understand, obviously, you never know what goes on in other people's lives, and that's fine. But if you get very close to someone, you generally start knowing, like I have met these people's families. I would be in like houses with them and they would be some of the most atrocious people. I mean, they couldn't care less. I had a girl who I was friends with and I had to physically cut her off because I just like could not stand talking to her anymore. Like that's how bad it got. And this girl had everything that I ever wanted, right? This family that I ever wanted and everything. And just because of the way she treated me, the way that she didn't support me, the way that I just felt that she was so toxic. She just wanted to talk badly about everyone, including those close to her. And the fact that she didn't support me when I made decisions, like went against her. Like if I dated someone that she didn't like, she would not make an effort to like this person, despite the fact that that person made me happy and also tried to get involved with her. So like I say, it doesn't really matter where you come from because guys, there are horrible people from great families. Some of the most atrocious people in history came from a lovely family. So it doesn't matter, okay? What matters is our free will, what we choose to do, okay? Because, for example, I could have had the most amazing, trauma-free life in the world, but if I went around treating people terribly and, you know, lying to people and betraying people, then does it matter that I came from a good family? No, of course not, because that's on me. Same thing. If you decide that you're going to go around treating people just because you're from a bad family, it doesn't, do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't really mean anything. Like, no, you're not going to get any support. You're not going to go anywhere. So listen, if you're literally sitting here and you're like, I don't have the family that I want. I don't feel like I had the family that I deserve. Make the family that you deserve. Find a man who has no trauma. He's smart. He's got ambitions. He wants to work. He's funny. And he doesn't need to be like incredibly wealthy. You probably don't even need that anyway. You just need someone who has a good income because he works, because he's educated, because he's smart. And he came from a nice family. and he treats you well. That's it. You didn't have to beg him. You didn't have to do all this kind of like games of trying to get his attention and stuff. He just showed up in your life, told you, I want to date you. I want to be your boyfriend. And that was it. If you don't have that, that's fine. But at least, like, you don't need a boyfriend, guys. Oh my God. If I tell you that you do not need a man to help you with this, oh my God, I could scream it from the rooftops. Because I used to think like a man would save me, but he can't. Okay, he can't save you. He can help you. Yes, if he introduced you to his family and they're all lovely, that's great. And you can use that to your advantage because later on you can recognize those healthy patterns. But obviously the man's not going to save you. I had this thing where I once dated someone who had the dream life I wanted. And because I was dating them, I felt like I was living this life. Now, when we broke up, it felt like that dream had vanished. It felt like I had it and it was gone. And it actually took me some time to realize, actually, he was not the dream. I was. He was just standing next to it. Okay? He was not the dream. If he had grown up in my house and I had grown up in his house and we had a parent swap, I probably would have never dated him because he probably would have turned out to be a psycho. No offense to him, but he probably would have. So that's why I was like, you know what? I am the dream. The dream lives and dies with me because if I didn't have this dream, it wouldn't exist. If I didn't have it within me, I wouldn't have been able to find it. I wouldn't be able to see it. So I'm going to take that dream with me somewhere else. And I'm going to find people that I actually genuinely love. And I'm going to put that admiration and affection onto them. And I'm going to do that because I'm an amazing person and I deserve to have a good life. And you deserve to have a good life. We all do. Okay? As long as you haven't got some terrible criminal record where you killed someone, right? We all deserve to just live good lives. And it doesn't matter if your family is abusive. Stay out of the house. Make sure that you have good contacts. Date sane people. Get your education, go to university and move out and leave them alone. And honestly, because you cannot allow these people to take away your future because you're the one that's going to lose. You could not go to school just to say, oh, fuck them, this will show them. But actually, like, you have no education. You can't move out. You need to get away from these toxic people. You will never be able to change them, okay? You'll never be able to change who your family is and you can't change the way they act and the way they think. That's it. It's not your responsibility. You don't need to help them if they don't want any help. Just say, they are how they are. They want to be like this, but don't allow yourself to become like this, okay? That's the most important thing. If you have a shitty family, honestly, do these things that I have said, okay? But most of all, guys, don't allow people in your life who have also had these experiences that think it's normal. 1 or 2 friends that have experienced it, fine. But guys, don't surround yourselves with people who also went through childhood trauma because you're going to be naturally drawn to those people because you're going to think they're like you. But the truth is that you don't want that because then you'll just start normalizing it in your head. You'll start seeing everyone has childhood trauma. Maybe it's normal. Maybe it's normal to behave this way. And it's not. It's absolutely not. I would never allow someone in my life who had this happen to them and then believed that it was normal and carried on doing it. Honestly, guys, no one's house is perfect, okay? But obviously, we all know that some are worse than others. At the end of the day, guys, what you do with your family trauma is on you and no one else. You cannot blame a single other person other than yourself. So get your education, okay? Like I say, guys, thank you so much for listening. This was a very passionate episode for me. I really do believe this because obviously I'm the one who also had to experience this. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. And guys, I have honestly never been happier than when I've cut off toxic people from my life. So thank you so much. My name is Natasha Belfort and this is Becoming Her Anyways.